My next guest on Showbiz today is one of Australia's greatest entertainers. With a career spanning some 6 decades, countless albums and singles, he's recorded so many over the years. That is just one of those. He's a member of the Order of Australia, granted in 1994. He's an Australia Day ambassador. He's rubbed shoulders with Barack Obama, performed for the Queen, and I'm talking about Kamahl. He's online right now. Kamahl, lovely to have you on the radio station today.
Good afternoon, Leigh.
How are you, Kamahl?
Fine. With all of those titles, I'm now an OBE.
An OBE, isn't that great?
Over bloody 80.
I like it. Over bloody 80.
Well, I never used to think about my age.
Yeah.
When I say I never used to think about it, I was rather, I don't know whether vain or shy or whatever it was. I never divulged my age too openly. I mean, whenever they asked, never gave them a direct answer.
Right.
But since becoming an OBE, I don't give a damn.
You don't give a damn, though. So what are you, 80, 82, 83?
I'll be 83 on November 13th this year.
Congratulations to you.
The day before Prince, the future king.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, Charlie boy.
Prince Charles.
Yeah, Prince Charles, yeah. Now, you arrived, if I'm right, in Adelaide back in 1953 to study...
53, the winter
King's
of 53. How can I forget?
You won't forget that one, not winter.
No, I was frozen physically and emotionally as well.
Were you really? Yeah.
Yeah. It was such a dramatic change of environment in every shape and size. The language was different. When I say language, they all spoke English, but I spoke Malayan English. And, I felt like an alien there. And I was one of the very, very few black people in Adelaide. I mean, because I never... the funny thing was I never became aware of the indigenous people for quite a time. And then eventually, in 1967... I played an Aborigine, an indigenous person, in a movie called Journey Out of Darkness.
Okay.
With Ed Devereaux.
Yes, remember.
Yeah. And the lead was an American actor, not well known, Conrad Mathai. And the small world is Rupert Murdoch's daughter through Anna, Elizabeth. Her boyfriend was Conrad Mathai's son.
Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was speaking to Anna Murdoch one day, and she said that Elizabeth was going out with somebody Mathai, and I said that wouldn't be the actor, and she said one and the same.
Goodness gracious!
But go on.
You mentioned Murdoch there, Rupert Murdoch. He was an important mentor to you, wasn't he?
Well, that's the understatement of the year, But for Rupert and for that, how shall I say, it was a serendipitous meeting, meaning it was quite unexpected. In December of 1958 in Adelaide, and he and his first wife, Pat, were there, cut a very long story short. And I was invited to their table, and later that evening I was invited to a party, which I realized many years later that was a news-limited Christmas party, and I sang, and Rupert was impressed enough to rush towards me and thrust a 10-pound note into my hands. And Dame Elizabeth, when she heard the story in 1982, she thought that couldn't be true because Rupert never carried that much money in his pocket.
Good story.
No, it's not a story, it's a fact.
Well, it's a fact. Yeah, good fact. Yeah. I love it. And of course, things went on from there for you, and I suppose in many ways you're indebted to Rupert for those years, and I suppose getting you started in a way.
Yeah, the thing is, there's a few months after that first meeting in December 58, the following year he bought Channel 9 in Adelaide. Mm-hmm. And then he moved to Sydney, maybe in 60 or 61, and one of his many trips back to Adelaide, he saw me at the studio singing Rambling Rose, and he said, I want a copy of that for Pat. And I said, it's your station, you do what you like. And then Again, a couple of months later, he said, "You better come to Sydney. I think you'll make it in Sydney." And I said, "No way." And I said, "I'd rather be a big frog in a small pond." And he would have none of it. But anyway, without even consulting me, I got a ticket to Sydney, came over to Sydney, and did a 6-week season at the Australia Hotel, which was the biggest hotel in Australia at the time, the most prestigious one. And at the end of the 6 weeks, because every Friday and Saturday night, Pat and Rupert would come and occupy the same table. And I went to say goodbye and thank them for their generosity and concern and kindness. And Rupert turned around and said, "Where do you think you're going?" I said, "I'm going back to Adelaide." And he said, "You're not." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're going to stay in Sydney." And like an idiot, I said, "Where will I stay?" He said, "Stay with us." And I must have looked at blank. "Yes, you're going to stay with us." And I became a resident at 71A Yarranaby Road, Darling Point, for the next 2 years.
Gee, isn't that wonderful?
I mean, talk about miracles.
Yes.
And in fact, funnily enough, I've been thinking of sending him an interview. It was done by one of the journalists in Sky TV. It is a half-hour documentary, not a documentary interview, which is on all the Qantas flights at the moment. And of course, a part of it naturally talks about Rupert, and I'm just not on the verge. I'm going to send it to him to say thank you yet again.
That's a lovely, lovely memoir. It really, really is. As you talk about that.
I mean, I could really write a book about him, and then later on, I came to know his family. His sister Helen, who's no longer with us. I think she was my number one fan, and she's a mother of Matt Hanbury, and a whole lot of them. And Matt has done very, very well, and they used to call him the man from Uncle. And and I really miss Helen. I mean, because I sang at her funeral service.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I sang the Lord's Prayer in Horsham. They lived in Horsham. And listen, I could really do a 3-volume book about the Murdochs.
Tell me about 1958. I was reading about you, and there was a Master of Ceremonies in that year who announced you as being Kamahl.
Oh, not only one person, everybody, even at school I was called Kamahl.
Really?
Yeah, because my real name is Kamaleswaran, so I shortened it to Kamahl, K-A-M-A-L.
Yes.
And as you would, even now, if I suppose somebody sees it, they will say Kamahl or Kamahl, and I was Kamahl, And would you believe it, there is a request from a company in Adelaide. They want to do a commercial for Thirsty Camel, and I'm considering. No, seriously.
Well,
have you ever heard of the Thirsty Camel?
Yes, I have. And why not? Go and do it.
Well, I have done a rough voiceover for them, and I'm waiting to see if they're impressed to see if they will fork out some of my rent.
Well, why not?
Exactly.
Let's talk about Australia Day. You're an ambassador, the Australia Day ambassador.
Yeah, in Australia Day, I think, if I'm right, started in 1988, the bicentenary.
Mm-hmm.
That was possibly the early part of it. Perhaps was the worst time in my career ever. And later on, it turned out to be okay, because when I say it was the worst, I had recorded 2 songs. One was called My Home, which is about the feelings of all FBAs, the foreign-born Australians, their sentiments about their adopted home. And it was written by Jackie Trent and Tony Hatch, even though it was my basic lyric or concept. Tony Hatch wrote the music, but anyway, and that was one. The other one is about a generic Australian song called "What Is Australia to Me?" That's for the FDAs, Fair Dinkum Aussies.
Right.
And I was really proud of those 2 because of the reaction I received from just about everyone who heard it. And naturally, I was a bit slow to contact any of the organizers because I was a little bit cocky, thinking they will invite me anyway. So I left it a bit late, maybe, October, maybe December, and I sent them. He said, I hadn't heard from them, and these are the two songs which I think would be appropriate. They sent the songs back to me and said, all the sentiments have been covered, we don't need you.
Oh.
And not only that, they were sarcastic enough with the song, What is Australia to Me? They said it was a parody of another song that's already recorded by, there was Sinatra and everybody else sang it. And I think it's called What is America to Me? And it was based on it with the approval of the original writer, a man called Earl Robinson I met in New York of October that year, and who gave me permission to record it. And so I, right through January, February, March, I hated the thought of the bicentenary, and maybe I was being too sensitive or whatever. I took it too personally, and it really affected me till much later in the year, just before Brisbane Expo. A man called a true gentleman, Sir Eric Neil, who was later become the governor of South Australia. He heard it, he loved it. As soon as he heard it, he said, you come over, I know you're going to be at the Brisbane Expo, and why don't you sing it for Prince Edward? So I sang it for him, and I introduced it as the FBA and the FDA song. And would you believe he told his mum and dad, who were waiting there, they were there ready to officially open the expo, and he told his mum and dad. So when I heard about this through Sir Eric Neil, I was so excited. I wrote to Sir Donald Bradman, and he replied on the day after his 80th birthday. It was on the 28th of August 1988, and there began a correspondence with Sir Donald till he passed away in 2001, and it was one of 76 letters. And in a way, I thank the organizers for not inviting me to the bicentenary, because I would have never met or written to develop such an unbelievable friendship.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. What do you think about the push at the moment to change Australia Day?
About changing the Australia Day? Well, if they are really serious about doing something for the indigenous people of Australia, there are maybe 100 things they could do rather than change the date. I think there should be like a social intercourse between the formal Australians and the indigenous people. I'm ashamed to admit that I don't have an indigenous person as a personal friend. I know, Ernie Dingo and people like that, but I don't have a friend or a neighbor that I can learn from about the Aboriginal culture and whatever. And I'm in a way embarrassed, not ashamed, embarrassed, because when I did the movie Journey Out of Darkness, I did it all over in the Northern Territory, and the lady playing opposite me was an Aboriginal girl. And I remember one particular afternoon we were filming, and they broke, and the producers, directors, and everybody were invited to the homestead to have lunch, and the girl and I were given a sandwich to eat outside.
Wow, how's that?
Yeah, so I didn't protest to say I may look like an Aborigine, but I'm not one.
Yeah.
So I quietly sat with her and ate, and in fact, there's a funny story about it, because the girl had to play sort of semi-naked, and the story goes, the producer, Frank Brittain, he called him Brittain, and apparently he used to interview all the young would-be actresses, and some of them were so shy they would only show one breast at a time.
Oh dear. Dear.
I don't know how far that was true. I never saw it.
Good on you. So you're not in favour of changing Australia Day then?
I beg your pardon?
You're not in favour of changing the date?
That would be an understatement.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe I don't know the full impact of all of that. If they are really concerned about the indigenous people of Australia, there are, so many other things that are of greater concern. And, I don't know who it is they are thinking about it. But for me, if you ask me, I would say no thanks. I feel extremely proud to be an Australian citizen and as an ambassador and to have represented Australia in many things, including singing for Australia in South America in 1972 at the International Song Festival and getting into the grand finals and all of that. And played hockey for Australia. Yeah. So, having all of that, I really don't know. Maybe somebody can explain to me the reasons why they want to change it. But the reasons I have so far looked at seem secondary to what needs to be done.
My guest is Kamahl on this part of the program. Kamahl, welcome back in. Tell me, on the phone yesterday, you and I were having a chat about Barack Obama. You got a great story to tell us.
Well, in 2007, on my way to Malaysia with my wife for a performance in Kuala Lumpur for the King of Malaysia, I was at the bookshop with my wife, and she's the one who's the bookworm. I saw a book called The Audacity of Hope, and my immediate reaction was a title like that, no Anglo-Saxon would come up with a title like that. In other words, it needs to be a non-white person, in other words, a black person. That was my knee-jerk reaction. Maybe, it's a Freudian reaction. Maybe some psychologist can explain to you why. So I picked up the book, read it, and then, I read the cover notes, and then I realized this is the guy I had heard about in 2004 when he spoke at the Democratic Convention and got an unbelievable response. So I bought the book, read it, and the funny thing was, by the time I got to my Kuala Lumpur, my home there, my old home, I felt my English has improved because it was so well written. And not only that, and his observation about his life in different parts of the world, in Hawaii and in Indonesia and everywhere else, and I could identify with so many of the things he said. So I started following him. And then, of course, in 2008, he ran for the presidency, and I really didn't think he had much of a chance. In early 2008, anybody would have taken a 1,000-to-1 bet that he would never get there with Hillary. But I started supporting him. And then, kind of long story short, there was a time when it seemed impossible for him to go because his preacher had said un-American things about him, and it looked like a death knell for Barack. So I watched it. I think the preacher was Jeremiah, and I had tears in my eyes watching it when Obama spoke and said that he would no more desert his grandmother than desert his preacher because there was a loyalty, and I really was moved by that speech. So immediately I got into the Google. I looked up Obama, and that's, there was a movement called Yes We Can, or Obama for America. So I put in maybe $100, twice to what the minimum. And within 2 hours, there was a reply. Signed, Obama, not signed, with the name Obama at the bottom. And there began my adulation, or whatever you want to call it. I became an Obama tragic. And never, ever believing that I would eventually one day meet him and dine with him. When I say dine with him, we were in the same room eating the same food, but he was a million miles away. But that same evening, against the wishes, and in spite of the Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan being within 2 yards, they ignored me completely. But I introduced myself to Barack Obama, and we had a long chat.
Good on you.
And I still have that picture.
Yes.
I should publish it. There's me and Obama and me in deep conversation. And the bookends is Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan. In fact, I like to send to them and said, thanks for the introduction.
Yeah. Yes, you should do that. What about Donald Trump? What do you think of Mr. Trump?
I think we should change the subject because I'm likely to say things that I might regret. I would rather talk about anybody else, Bradman or anybody else.
Good on you. Kamahl, what about entertaining these days? You still singing?
Well, you wouldn't believe it. Something happened in the last 10 days.
Yes.
Because, as you get older, a lot of the parts approach their use-by date.
Yes, I know.
And my eyes have approached by use-by date, so I wear glasses.
Right.
And there are a few other things, and my plumbing needed a bit of fixing.
Right.
And my hearing was going slowly, and way back in 2012, I was invited to do Speaks and Specs. And I was a bit concerned that if I attended and if I didn't hear the questions, I couldn't answer it.
Yes.
So at the cost of $8,000, I bought a pair of hearing aids. And I got to the Speaks and Specs, and Adam Hills asked the questions. I heard the questions, but I didn't know the answers.
Good one.
But the only saving grace was at the end of the show, the director got me to read the lyrics of Speaks and Specs. I didn't realize it was a song for the Bee Gees.
The Bee Gees, yeah.
It's great lyrics, and I had teleprompters, and I did it. And would you believe, if you'll forgive me saying it, I got a standing ovation.
Well done.
And you can see that on YouTube. If you go to your Google and Kamahl Speaks and Specs, you'll see my reading of it, and also the pianist, I forget his name, Casey, he's a Victorian.
Right, okay.
A genius of a man. I think he wrote some musicals even. Not Ron Casey, but some other Casey.
Some other Casey, yeah.
And he's there, and he and I sort of collaborated, and I told him, if you can do this for me as I read this, something that I'm really, really, really proud of.
Kamahl, it's been a delight to talk to you today on the program. A wonderful insight into your life and things you've done and people you've met along the way.